Hi everyone, how is everyone today?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I'll just let a few more people join before we get started. Yeah, hopefully we don't have that sound when I'll be on mute.
Yeah, I didn't think to put mine on. Oh well, hopefully it won't. It's past that point where people are emailing.
It's past that now. So I guess we have a lot to get through, so I'll just get started. There'll always be the recording. So I just want to say hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So today we have our amazing guest speaker, Michelle, who's from the University of Bath, and we'll be talking about all employability skills. So from CVs to interview techniques, we'll be going through it all. So I guess I'll just do a quick introduction on NIA. So we're a social mobility network, and we aim to connect underrepresented groups in the tech industry to global organisations. So one way we've been doing this is through our community launch. So this is a place where we've decided you can view opportunities, jobs, events. You also get to talk to lots of your other peers. So everyone else with a tech interest or with similar backgrounds, you get to talk to them as well. So that has been a new launch that we've done, and I'll put the link for that in the chat section just so everyone can join up and really get to meet other people who are also like them. So I'll also just give a quick introduction to myself. So I'm Millie, and I'm the intern at NIA. So I am the Community and Partnerships Executive at NIA, and I'm also on placement from the University of Bath, which is where I received my training from Michelle, which is how I know it will be so amazing and so helpful to all of you. So if there are any questions for Michelle, please just put them in the chat section at any point. It'll be great to see them, and we'll get to them at the end. But if there's no more questions or anything, I will just pass over to Michelle to take over the rest of the session.
Fantastic. Thank you, Millie. And thank you for inviting me to come along and speak. So to give you a bit of information about me and my background, I won't talk for long, just a little bit about where I've come from and what I'm doing now. So I graduated from what's now Solent University and was Southampton Institute at the time. I studied a marketing degree, and following that ended up in a couple of different jobs, and then landed myself into the world of play. Completely different to where I am now. I had a complete career pivot. I spent about 15 years designing, creating and selling outdoor play schemes. This was actually one of mine that you can see on the screen in a town called Salisbury. But a few years in, and I've got 3 children, and my daughter said to me, "Mum, I'd really love you to be near home more often. I'd like you to be here." And so I had to really think about sort of what I was going to do and where I was going to be. And this job popped up at the University of Bath to work with students as a placements officer, supporting students through their journey into placements as a part of their degree. I spoke to family and friends about, is this going to be suited? And they're like, it's up your street completely. Go apply. And honestly, I've never looked back since. But what it's enabled me to do is support, oh gosh, well over 1,000 people now to find opportunities and sort of prepare them with those employability skills that kind of set them up into interviews when they get them, how to actually secure the interviews in the first place, and then support them through their placement experience whilst they're at Bath. Now, my role has changed slightly. I'm now a business engagement manager for the School of Management, but my passion for helping people and supporting people to find that opportunity is very much deep-rooted in me. So I was really pleased to come along and help. I'm going to cover today, it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour because we haven't got a huge amount of time, but we're going to cover the basics of writing a CV, how to decode and write an effective cover letter, and then sort of once you've got to the tail end of that and you've secured an interview, how you might tackle that, that experience. So if we think about, writing an application, okay, it's a bit like marketing a product. So if we take this supermarket picture, okay, there are absolutely tons of products on this shelf. Some are colourful, some are plain, some have got different messages on them. They've all got different qualities, flavours, packaging. I'm on that shelf. It says pick me, but actually, how easy is it for somebody to find me on that shelf? And how can I make sure that somebody puts me into their trolley? And that's where writing a really clear CV and a really good application that shows off your transferable skills, your experiences, kind of really starts to fly your flag. You start to take it from being sort of you, one of many, to demonstrating to the employer that you are the person that meets their requirements the best. But how do you go about doing that? Well, I'm going to discuss that with you now and show you some hints and tips and some tricks. So all you've got to do, essentially, is catch the employer's attention with a really good CV and cover letter, and demonstrate you're an outstanding candidate for the role at interview. It does take some effort. I'm not going to say this is easy, but I've got some hints and tips. So if we take your CV is like your first marketing tool. You know, put simply, it's a summary of your previous experience, an opportunity for you to demonstrate your unique strengths. What so many people get wrong with their CV is that they simply say kind of what they did and don't actually tell people how well they did it. If you go back to that supermarket shelf, you know, it's very rare that you would find a box on a shelf that says, hey, I'm a box of tea bags, or I'm a packet of biscuits, and doesn't really tell you much about kind of why, or isn't colourful, or tells you about the flavours. Everything has got to sell itself. If you don't sell yourself, who else will? And this is especially relevant when we come to see how long employers take when they actually look at a CV. It's shocking. 6 seconds is the time that 6 seconds is going to move across the screen. That may vary. I mean, some employers will spend longer than others, but if typically they've got a big pile of CVs in front of them, they're going to flick through and they're going to start to see very quickly who they can shortlist to kind of that next stage where they start to sort of really look at them in depth and see who's suited. You've got to make it really simple for them to read. You've got to stand out from the crowd. If you don't stand out from the crowd, the chances are you're going to get the email that pretty much all job seekers dread, and that's that email that says, hey, you know, thanks for your application, but on this occasion, the standard of applications was so high, and it's with regret that. I've always hated getting those emails. I'm sure you do too. It's like a heart-sinking moment. So, you know, we've got to think about how we can go about making you stand out and really show off those skills that you've obtained. Now, I'm going to assume that you know the basic structure of a CV, and the order of the information can vary from candidate to candidate, and they're very subjective, right? Some companies will have different opinions, and everybody will vary. But ultimately, the details you want to include, so you're going to need to make sure your contact details are there, with your email and your telephone, making sure it's up to date. With that as well, if you put your telephone number on there, people will still use your telephone number to call you about interviews. Make sure you've got a really good voicemail, because there's some funny ones out there. I've heard them all in my role as placements officer. So make sure that's up to date. At some point in your CV, you're going to want your education history on there. Now, that's up to you whether you want to put it at the top or the bottom. But if it's one of your key strengths, put it at the top. Keep it to including the subjects and your grades. And then start to include your experience. These should be listed with the most recent at the top. So we work kind of in reverse chronological order. Make sure you include your dates that you started and finished, and start to include your responsibilities and achievements in that role. You might want to include some voluntary experience on there. List again those the most recent first, always doing it in reverse chronological order, and start to detail again where, what you did. Then you might also want to include additional skills and achievements. That could be sporting accolades, it could be additional qualifications, it could be training courses, it could be that you won an award for speaking, who knows? And then you can also start to include your personal interest. And a lot of people underestimate the importance of these, but actually, if you've got two candidates that are kind of side by side and one's got something really interesting, perhaps an unusual hobby or something that's stands them out from the crowd in terms of additional achievements, for example, that's when they start to select between those two. So if you've got two that are identical, they can start to make decisions based on other areas. So, but don't underestimate, kind of what do you do for fun and what makes you tick, like what makes you who you are, because that will help an employer to realize whether you're going to fit them and they're going to fit you. And so what do you do if you're pivoting from kind of one career to another? That's often kind of not so much a question for the students I work with, but for people like myself. I mean, I pivoted from sales to working with students as a placements officer. I had to really show where I had those transferable skills. Now, there's a difference between kind of soft skills and hard skills. So transferable skills that are soft, kind of behavioral, they're developed over time. Things like communication, teamwork, adaptability, relationship building. Hard skills are going to be things like things that you learned through training and education. So it could be data analysis skills. It might be that you've got coding. It could be that you've got particular IT and software experience, or you might speak a language. Those are the hard skills, and they are transferable, but they're more sort of, you've got to have obtained those through training. The soft skills are where you might start to say, well, actually, I had experience in this area, and I've done something that doesn't really match what you're after, but it can be transferred across. Now, every single one of you will be unique. Every single one of us has got different things, different experiences that will have shaped who you are and what makes you different. That could be that you've skydived from 10,000 feet. It could be that you've won the five-a-side county championship for the five-a-side league. You might be a volunteer at a local food bank, or you might have caring responsibilities. Whatever it is, every single one of those things will start to shape who you are, and you can really utilize those to show those transferable skills that we just mentioned. So this is a completely and utterly made up example, but if we take an example of Becky, okay, so Becky, she's got a passion for environment. She's studying graphic design at college, and she's a carer. She supports her mum who has a life-limiting condition. Because family income is restricted, because her mum is unable to work, she also feels that responsibility. So she works at a local cafe. And through that experience, actually, she's been able to put her interest in the environment to good use, because she's noticed that they were putting loads of food in the waste in bins each day. They were uneaten, they couldn't be used again. And she helped identify an ordering system that would help the cafe to go on to reduce their waste by around 20%. Due to her personal experiences with her family and her responsibilities of making sure that money goes a long way, she's got experience with money management and budget management skills. And so Becky decided she was going to volunteer at a charity that teaches young people how to cook healthy and affordable meals, and she does that once a month. So that's Becky. But if we think about her and her transferable skills, she's got tons. It starts to sort of really build a picture about her, and we can also start to think about how well she's using them. So she could zoom in, for example, on her ability to cut waste and therefore increase profit at the cafe. So kind of showing how she understood the bigger picture of what was going on, understanding that the cafe was really on a tight budget themselves and needed to balance that kind of profit and loss. She could also talk about the number of young people she'd helped through the charity, and if data allowed it, she could start to showcase how much money she'd saved them by teaching them how to batch cook, for example. She's gone above and beyond. She's been professional. She's shown emotional intelligence. There's a whole range of skills that she can lean on. Giving another example, Salman moved to the UK at the age of 10 and didn't speak English. he was put in an English speaking school and had to learn the language really quickly. He was passionate about football and had, prior to moving to the UK, had played since the age of 3. So that helped. And he, on moving to the UK, started to play in local football leagues, and actually soon found himself training twice a week and playing matches at weekends. His experience of moving to the UK and feeling like a fish out of water has led him to create a support group for children who also don't speak English and have moved to the UK. He wanted to make sure that it was a really fun environment where children can play and reconnect with cultures from their home environments, but also supported them through to learn how to read and write English so that he could support them in school. To do this, he's had to apply for funding to enable him to be able to pay for premises. He's had to market the group to schools and use social media. It's been a big success, and he's now been able to put a group of people in place who can manage that, but he's also had to apply for funding on a regular basis to enable that to keep going. Again, we can start to zoom in on his ability to raise funds, even showcase the amount he's had to raise. He's clearly a natural problem solver. He saw a problem in his local community. He decided to take action on it. And learning a language is never an easy task. I admire anybody who can do that. I only speak one, and sometimes that's not very well. So to say he could speak another language is a massive achievement to showcase, especially when he's come across them, just kind of been thrown into that scenario. But he's also shown kind of leadership skills and tenacity. He didn't take no for an answer. And he's shown kind of professional commitment. He didn't take no for an answer, and he knew that hard work equaled results. So you start to see how those could then be applied to future applications. So hopefully you're starting to see how you can draw out those from your personal experiences and start to apply them on your CV. If we go back to the basics, if we kind of think about how each experience starts to shape us, you then need to start to put it all together on your CV. And there's a few things that I would recommend. So find a template or structure that works for you. Don't be tempted to overcomplicate your CV. You're amazed how many we see that have got kind of different fonts, different sizes, bold, italics, all sorts. And it becomes really confusing. Try and stick to one if you can, and make sure that it's really easy to read. Always focus on the positives of any job. You might have hated that job, might have been the worst job in the world. You might have done something as a hobby and maybe you didn't enjoy it that much, but focus on the positives and the skills and the achievements and the real positives that you got from that. Most importantly, see if you can demonstrate your transferable skills and then kind of how you use them. Often people will focus on what they did, but they don't say how. They don't evidence it. And anybody can list skills on their CV. You can say they've got communication skills, problem solving skills, IT skills. If you can't show how you've done that, how's the person reading it supposed to know how well you've been doing it, or how you've applied it in the past? Evidence is really critical. In terms of the layout, I've mentioned sticking to a format. You can use bullets. Bullets will help people to see and pick out information quite quickly. You could use subheadings. Occasionally, maybe introduce a bit of colour if it feels right. Keep it professional and, like I say, remain positive. So if you've got all of that right, you've got your CV, you've got an effective document that's going to promote you. Alongside that, lots of companies still ask for covering letters. And if that puts the fear of God into you, then you're not alone. Even I kind of get a little bit kind of freaked out when I start seeing cover letters. But there's some tips and some ways to tackle it that can really help. A good cover letter will be completely unique to the company and the role you're applying for. So if you could replace the address and the person you're addressing it to London Zoo, and it would still make sense, you've been way too generic. The letter itself is going to need to be about you and your background. It's going to show why you want to work for the business, why you're a good fit. So how does your experience, your background, your interests fit with the company? Why would you like to work for them? Kind of how do your values align? And that's going to come out of research. So one of the first things you need to do when you're actually applying for a role is look at what they do. What does the company do? What's going on in their sector right now? Who are their competitors? What's going on in their world now, and perhaps even in the past? Are there any case studies online? I mean, fortunately for us now, the information is probably at the touch of a button. We can find out by looking at people's LinkedIn posts. We can look at even TikTok videos. We can look at Facebook profiles. We can look at Instagram. There's so many ways to find out about a company. And a lot of that information will start to build up a picture about kind of what their company values are, whether they've got a particular strategy about social responsibility. There may even be kind of TED Talks or presentations you can watch. But I would say find something in that research that interests you. And actually, if when you're doing your research, you think, oh God, actually, this doesn't interest me, this company really doesn't meet what I'm looking for, then potentially that isn't a job to apply for. But you know, when it's, so long as you find it interesting and you can find all that information, that's then going to start to inform you about what you actually write. Again, if you don't have relevant experience, you know, when I applied for the role as placements officer, I'd never worked with students. I'd worked with children when I was designing playgrounds. And I had supported people, I'd mentored people who I worked with, but I had never worked in a university. So I had to really think about where I could transfer those skills from. You've got to start to kind of look at the art of decoding a job advert. And a good job advert will actually tell you exactly what they're looking for. You've just got to locate the information. So I've dug out an old job description. So this is, I mean, you might even see the date on there, 2019. It's an old one, but it's a good one. And they don't tend to vary too much. It tells us about the role and the responsibilities. So we can establish if we'd be suited to it, but more importantly, it shows the key skills that they're actually looking for in a candidate. So if we look at that, it says that they want somebody who's going to be motivated, want somebody who can organize their time, can manage projects, has a strong analytical ability and some interpersonal skills. So if we think about the example of Becky, who we looked at, who had some experience in volunteering, who was a carer, who had a part-time job and had a passion about sustainability. Becky's done her research. She's understood that the company is the largest hazelnut consumer company. She can see that they're passionate about sustainability. They are hot on diversity and inclusion, and they are growing at a great rate through acquisition and want to be the biggest supplier in their sector. With that information to hand and probably a bit more in depth than a few bullets on a slide, she can start to formulate a plan. She knows that they want somebody who's going to be motivated and organised, so she can start to provide some examples. And I quite often use this kind of table example where you start to sort of break down what they're looking for and an example. And sometimes the examples that you put in the right column can identify more than one of the skills that they're looking for. So you can kind of tailor a really nice, succinct paragraph about both. So we know that Becky's a volunteer, and she's therefore had examples when she's been a trusted confidant by people attending. She's learned to communicate really effectively. We know that through her volunteering work, she was responsible for managing a cookery school, so she was able to manage budgets and timings and invites. So she actually can really start to demonstrate where those skills can be applied. You may have come across this before, and we're going to talk about it in the context of writing cover letters, but also interviews. It's the STAR approach. And STAR simply stands for situation, task, action, and result. So what you're going to tell them is, what was the situation that you did? And again, we're looking at examples of each skill that they want an example of. So it could be an example of when we were particularly motivated, or if we take that example there, the ability to manage projects. So Becky might talk about a situation like her volunteering in the cookery school, where she's had to manage the budget and organising events, the task in hand and what she did, action, so what she actually did and how she went about completing the task. So did she secure funding? So similar to Salman's example, he had to go and secure funding. Becky may have had to go and get some funding to actually run those events and secure ingredients, etc. And then what was the result? And in this case, it could be that she developed a large following. She's been able to support 30 people in her local community, for example. Really good if you can include numbers when you start to demonstrate the transferable skills. For some reason, human beings work well around numbers. It starts to really sort of register. So if you can say you helped 30 people, or you increased social media following by 20%, or gained another 500 followers, or whatever it is, that numerical data really supports people's kind of understanding of what you did. So I'm going to talk you through the basic structure to a cover letter. Basically, you're going to want to have an opening, why you're interested in the company, why the role, and why you. You can also start to use what's commonly used in marketing as a kind of the AIDA model. So grabbing somebody's attention, building on their interest, securing their desire in what you do, and then getting their action. Again, go back to that job description, keep a copy of it, and go back to it, look at what they're after again, really look at the responsibilities, the purpose of what is it they're looking for, and the skills they're looking at. Now, you won't believe how many cover letters that we see, and I've proofread and looked at absolutely hundreds of cover letters over the years. So many of them begin with exactly the same statement. I am writing to apply for the insert position as appropriate, as advertised by Naya. I'm confident, blah, blah, blah. It could be literally written to anybody, any company, is completely generic, and if I'm honest, doesn't really capture the interest of the person reading it because it's identical to everybody else's. If you go back to the job description, as I mentioned, you can start to build in your research about the company, and you can start to see, so in Becky's case, there's a common point of interest. They're really passionate about sustainability, so is Becky. We can start to see that they've got a core value that's in common. So if we go back to that example and try again, actually we can start to say something like, from a young age, I've had an interest in sustainability and firmly believe we all have a part to play in climate change. Ferrero clearly holds similar values, so I'm excited to apply for the position of customer development assistant. We start to say with that statement, hey, I know this is one of your core values, and actually it's one of mine too. We've got something in common here, like we could get along. And once we've got their attention, we need to build on their interest and start to demonstrate that we've done our research in a bit more depth. So I've written a statement there. It demonstrates an understanding of the company value regarding zero waste. It also starts to alert the company to the fact that Becky has experience in that area. It's not just a passing comment. She's serious about the environment. But in addition, she's been able to promote and even action change in her role in the cafe. Now, in the job description, it started to talk about they were looking for somebody who was motivated, rational, and keen to influence change. And through this statement, and by saying that she'd been able to reduce food waste by 20% and convincing her employers to do so, she starts to build that perception that actually she's quite capable of influencing that change. And she's also highly motivated. She's rational. She starts to, again, identify that she's meeting the criteria that they've set. And then if we look at kind of desire, it's kind of, why am I a good fit? Why me? Why would you employ me? And you start to again build on those skills yet again. So a couple of well-written but succinct paragraphs will do in this area. And again, this is where the plan comes in. So if you've planned out and you can see that one example covers maybe 2 of the skills that they're looking for, you can write a really neat paragraph around that. And then finally, what you need is a kind of really good closing paragraph, end on a high, be positive. I would avoid the hard sell, so, hey, you'd be mad not to pick me, people will see through that. But, if you're friendly, you can express interest in the position, summarize why you want it, why you're interested and why they should pick you, and actually thank them for their time in reading it. It's a time-consuming process. And thanking somebody for doing so will go a long way. The basic layout of a letter, I know sometimes these things aren't taught in school. I don't think anybody even taught me. I think my mum did years ago. A basic letter layout will have your address and your name and details in the right corner, and then it will have the name of the person you're sending the letter, their address, the date, and the dear. And please always try to use the recruiter's name on the left-hand side, and then you start your letter. If you don't know who it is that you're writing to, what I would highly recommend you do is get in touch with them and ask. It shows proactivity. You're actively showing an interest in the position. You might even be able to have a chat with them at that point and find out a little bit more. It might even give you further information to make your cover letter even better. But if you don't put their name, just so it shows a kind of lack of interest and a kind of lack of proactivity. I heard this said to me a while ago by an employer, and they said, they'd see, we were running some mock interviews and somebody had written reams and reams of text. And he said, I wrote a long letter because I didn't have time to write a short one. You're going to need to maybe do a couple of drafts of your cover letter. So do it, go away, go back, have a look at it again, proofread it, maybe even get somebody else to have a look at it and start to keep honing it down to the point where actually you've got something that's really clear, really easy to read, hasn't got masses of text, hasn't got loads of really long paragraphs, and then you'll make it easy for that person reading it. So aim for 1 page maximum, 3 to 4 paragraphs. Stick to a professional business layout if you can. Remember, it probably should be seen as a formal writing style, but with that, you might also find that there are companies that are less formal than others. So again, through your research, you'll be able to identify that. So if it seems like a really serious company, keep to being really serious. If it looks like that company is perhaps a bit more fun, a bit more, if they're marketing themselves as kind of really relaxed, then maybe you can mirror that in your cover letter a little bit. I've mentioned about addressing to the person. Make sure it reads well. If you can't find the name of the person, use yours faithfully at the end of the letter, but hopefully you do, so write yours sincerely and then your name. Most importantly, in so many job descriptions, I see the term looking for attention to detail. And if people then write a cover letter and they forget to check the grammar, check the spelling, or there's typos or there's silly errors, immediate no-no. So especially if it says attention to detail, but please just go about it as a general habit, check, and maybe get somebody else to check through it as well. So congratulations, you've got through this process, you've done your CV, you've got your cover letter in, they've selected you for interview. Now what? Do you panic? Is it going to change? There we go. No, you need to just calm yourself down. You've got this far, right? You've shown them that you're the ideal candidate for the job. They've selected you for interview. So you can calm yourself down, but you do need to prepare. That's really important. If you prepare to fail, then if you fail to prepare, prepare to fail. That's the phrase I'm looking for. So I can't stress enough how important it is to have a copy of the job description to hand, because sometimes these are unavailable. Applying for a role at the University of Bath, if you don't keep a copy of it, once it's gone, that's it. Then you have to message in and ask for a copy of it, and always feels a bit silly because actually you know deep down you should have saved a copy. So find it, go back over what the company is looking for, and then check and read your cover letter. What did you tell them, and what does your CV say? Your CV, you might have tweaked your CV according to which company you were applying for to make sure it's kind of tailored. Which CV did you send them? What did you say? Make sure you have a copy of it. And then you can start to plan. Now, my brain works quite visually, so I find using mind maps really helps. So I look at kind of what do I need to know about them, so that when they say that question, what do you know about us, I'll have that information to hand. So I might look at LinkedIn and their website, and maybe Glassdoor, which is a resource for finding out. It gives sort of employee opinions on a company. There might be case studies, there might be news articles. So I'll start to sort of pad that out in my plan. There's the age-old question of kind of tell us about yourself. So actually I want to be really clear about what picture I want to build around that. I'm a young carer. What does that mean? It means I can manage my time. I work part-time. I'm supporting the family income. I'm passionate about volunteering. I'm passionate about sustainability. What are my plans for the future? And I start to build a picture with that. And in my mind, I can refer back to this mind map and see it. So when they ask those questions, I'm kind of in my head, I'm thinking, okay, no, I know this, I've written it down. If you're not the sort of person that uses a mind map, maybe again, that kind of table approach might be more your thing. So, going back to our example with Salman, the structure might work for him. He is looking at being motivated and organised. We took the initiative following personal experience to start up a voluntary support group. He has the ability to manage projects. So he's organised a football tour. So he's got loads of examples that he can now start to use. And it gives him that opportunity to lean on various things. Quite often in the interview, I've done it myself, where you think, oh my goodness, I can't think of anything else. I've only got that one example. But if you've planned it, if you've really thought it through in advance, and you've got that mind map or a table that you have written in advance, okay, you're not going to have it in front of you necessarily if you're in an in-person interview, deep down you've got those examples and you can lean on them and you'll start to remember them. And again, you can go back to that STAR approach. Now, companies quite often like to use competence questions. So to give you an example, give me an example of when you had to influence a decision. What did you do and what was the outcome? Or tell me about a time when you had to work as a team, or tell me about a time when something went wrong. How did you deal with it? And the trick is a bit like you did with the cover letter, where you gave an example and you told them the task and action and how that resulted. You take them through a journey. So, what was the situation you found yourself in? Well, for Salman, for example, so he was in a situation where he had personal experience of arriving in the UK and found it really tricky to meet people, to adapt and to learn English. And he didn't want people to go through that situation again. So he decided he was going to set up a support group for young people that would enable them to feel comfortable in their local environment, to have something that they would enjoy attending, and that he could support them through their English language development. In order to do so, he had to go and get that sort of funding. He had to go about marketing it, etc., etc. And the result was that he's now got this group that's highly attended, is referred to by local schools, and he's won an award per se. We might take them on that journey. If you want to take it one step further, you can start to use CARL. And CARL effectively is the same as STAR, but so you're going to give context. So what was the situation, the action, what did you do? And it's really important that when you think about that action, that you think about what your personal contribution. Quite often people get a bit stuck on talking about the collective of their action. So you know, we did this, we did that. And actually, if you can say, you know, collectively we had this project, but my responsibility was to do X, Y, and Z, you then start to demonstrate that actually you had very firm involvement, but actually you can work as a team as well. You talk about the results. So what did you achieve collectively, individually, both? And then the critical difference here is, what did you learn from that experience? Like, what would you do differently if you were to do it again? Or what did you just take away from that? You know, what was the result of it that made a real difference to you? That will start to elevate you above many, many candidates who will literally tell you about what they did and don't take you through that journey, and don't actually then say about that kind of level of humility at the end. Like, it proves you're not the done deal. You're always going to be reflecting and seeing how you could do things differently in the future. And then really importantly, you're going to need to ask some questions of your interviewer. And asking a good question is pretty key, but having a list of questions that you might want to ask, you might want to prepare them in advance, you might want to write them down. I personally think it's absolutely acceptable to refer to some notes in this situation and say, well, actually, I do have some questions. If you don't mind, I'm going to refer to my notes because there were a number of things I wanted to find out. When you're asking questions, it's your opportunity to find out if this job is going to suit you, because actually when they're interviewing you, as much as this process is about whether you are suited, you know, whether the role and whether the company is suited to you as well. So if you're a social butterfly and you love being going out with your team, and you like that idea of socializing with people, it's a social team. What happens outside of work? What's the company like to work for? Are people generally quiet? Are, you know, is it, do people come into the office? Is it a hybrid environment? Will there be opportunities for training and development further down the line? How is the team structured? Who would be your line manager? What are the next steps for them? Now, these are questions that can really help you to understand, you know, if they say, okay, well, we're going to interview another 4 people, you're the third. And we're interviewing the rest of the candidates by Friday, and we hope to make a decision by Monday. Well, at that point, you know, Monday, that you're pretty certain they will have interviewed all those candidates. And probably, if you haven't heard back from them, you could do a little follow-up. You could say, well, you know, it's great to meet you. Wondered if there was any feedback. Have you been able to make your decision? Beyond that, then you start to realize that, you know, maybe things are taking either a bit longer, or perhaps you've not been successful. My top tips for interviews: ask open questions, but also be really open and prepared that an interview might take a different course. You know, sometimes they're really formal. You'll go in and somebody will be asking questions and expecting you to answer them in a particular way. Sometimes, and the interviews I prefer, are the kind of more conversational interviews. And just be open for that to happen. Be open for that change, and be prepared that it might happen. If an interview is really stressful, and you know, everybody suffers from nerves at some point or another, if you feel like they might get the better of you, I promise this will make you feel a bit daft, but it works. Do the Superman pose, like stand with your hands on your hips and be positive about life for 2 minutes. And for whatever reason, there must be some psychology behind it. It will reduce that level of kind of cortisol that causes stress, and will bring you down a notch, just so that you can compose yourself ahead of the interview. I've also been known to kind of sing around the house and be a bit daft and dance and kind of release some energy that way. But Superman pose, promise, works. And then smile. And if you smile, kind of the world will smile with you. And by smiling, you don't want anything freaky. You don't want to kind of be like, ooh. But if you smile, you show an interviewer that you're approachable, you're friendly, but also that you're comfortable in that situation. You know, actually, this is okay. And they will hopefully then smile back. And ultimately, then you're both then relaxed. Quite often, interviewers are actually sometimes nervous about interviewing, believe it or not. So, you know, if you can both make each other feel comfortable, win-win. That leaves me finally really to say, if any of you are looking for jobs, applying for jobs, ready to attend interviews, just to say good luck. I really hope that what I've shown you here is going to be of use. If anybody, we've got some time for questions, so we can take some questions now. If anybody's not comfortable asking questions in a kind of public forum, do look me up on LinkedIn. Feel free to ask me a question there. And say good luck and all the best. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was amazing. So we'll just go through a few questions that we have, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So our first question is from Camille. Hi, Camille. Great to see you here. And his question is, how would you rank the importance and attractiveness of speaking multiple languages in a CV?
Ooh, I would say it's really important. I think, like I said, I speak one language and I admire anybody that speaks multiple languages. I suppose if the role doesn't have a kind of call for additional languages, then maybe it might not be as much use, but I just think that it's such an important transferable skill, right? The ability to take on that information, to learn multiple languages, really important. I would probably place it, you could, if you've got qualifications in those languages, you could put it in your education. I would probably put it in the additional skills and qualifications space, but really highlight it and say languages, and then detail each one and say the competence level as well. So you might be fluent, you could be conversational, or could be basic. But yeah, that's where I probably detail those, but great question.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. Our next question is from Ola. So she's asking what the main difference between a cover letter and a supporting statement is, and can you use the same content for both and not just include the address within the supporting statement?
Okay, yeah, so that is a good point, and a good question, because some companies have started to use those supporting statements. Yeah, ultimately, it's the same way of tackling it. If it's a supporting statement, you're writing your justification for why you've applied for that job. So same principles apply. Look at those skills that they're after. Where are your transferable skills? Where can you evidence them? And then write some really good examples. And I would say, again, with a supporting statement, unless they've limited to a particular number of characters or words, probably 3-4 paragraphs max.
Yeah, okay, perfect, thank you. And we have Karen asking, how do you reach out to recruiters on LinkedIn in the right way? Kind of more in a professional way about a job opening or a company?
Okay, so if they've got a job that's open already and you're wanting to approach them, I would say a friendly, simple note, not too much information, and you could say something along the lines of, I've noticed that there's a role currently advertised for whatever the role is. I'm really interested in making an application, but I wondered if I could just ask you a few questions before I put the application together. Would it be possible to arrange a quick telephone call with you or a video call to get that information? And then hopefully they'll respond. Again, I really like that because I think it shows that level of proactivity and shows a genuine interest. If you are approaching recruiters speculatively, then again, try not to take up too much information, too much space on that note. A simple note that says, I'm currently looking for opportunities in X, Y, and Z. I'm really interested in your company. Would it be possible to even arrange a quick chat to understand if there's any opportunities? That sort of approach, tweak it according to you and make it sound like you and not me. But something along those lines is usually acceptable, I think.
Yeah, so kind of just keep it simple is the best way to go.
Keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Thank you. And then we have a Rani asking if you can share your LinkedIn account just so that they connect, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
perfect.
If I share it with you, Millie, should we do it that way?
Yeah. You can post it on the chat if that's easier, or I could share it with the community members. Okay,
I'll need to
I'll give you time to do that.
Find it on my screen. I've only got 2 screens. Bear with me 1 second. I'll tell you what, let's take another question. I'll see with that. Otherwise, I'll just
great. Thank you. So we have Karen asking, what if you're an intern and your contributions to your workplace can't be quantified? How would you sell yourself then?
Okay, another good question. So yeah, not everything can be quantified. You know, I come from a sales background where I could say increase sales by X or achieved a sale of blah. I think at that point then it's, I suppose, demonstrating how well you did something. I'm trying to think of a good example of where that might be possible. Or if you take the example in the slides, right, with Becky, it'd be hard for her to quantify time management actually, because it's probably going to be different all the time. But you know, talking about it in a cover letter and demonstrating that she has had to juggle multiple things, like her caring responsibilities, her part-time job, volunteering, I suppose that kind of justifies the requirement without actually putting any data around it, because it'd be impossible to do that.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. We've got another one from David. So he's got any tips for dealing with an aggressive interview style from the interviewers? So he personally believes that it's kind of how the idea that they want to see you deal with confrontation, but it's kind of, it could be seen as a red flag by employees. So are there any tips on dealing with that kind of interview style?
Oh, that's a tricky one, actually. Do you know what? My husband once had an interview and he was trying to kind of pivot on a role, and he went into an interview for a sales role, and they were like, sell me something, sell me this pen. And he went, oh my goodness, I don't know. And actually, he probably did the right thing for him. He's like, oh, look, I don't feel very comfortable with this. And he ended the interview. But yeah, dealing with somebody, I'd like to think that interviewers aren't going to be really aggressive in style. It could indicate what they're like. I suppose maintaining your composure during that situation is going to be really critical. So not being drawn into that aggressive style, and then you might start to see if they are pulled out of it. You might also then want to explore, you know, are they actually going to be your line manager? Because if they're not, is it going to matter? Who else? Is there any way you might be able to meet other people in the team? So that you could establish who you're going to be working with, and, you know, hopefully they might be able to calm that kind of feeling that you might have about an employer. But most interviewers, I don't know whether this person has experienced an interview like that. I personally haven't, but I know that they do exist.
Yeah, I'd say from personal experience, I would really agree with the whole staying composed. It can be very nerve-wracking, especially going into interview, and then you kind of have that aggressive style, but I'd definitely say composure definitely helped me within an interview situation like that. And we got another question from Abdullah. So usually recruiters ask for LinkedIn profiles. While we can structure the CV for particular posts, what can we do about the LinkedIn profile, which is very close to the CV?
Yeah, and it will be close to your CV. LinkedIn's becoming more and more prevalent, and we talk to students about how to create a profile that's going to really work for them. I think it's really similar to your CV. Again, it's all about those, you know, demonstrating those kind of core values that you have, but also how well you've done things. And, you know, if you're looking for a job, don't be afraid to really sell yourself on that forum, I think would be the key. Recruiters use it. And quite often, you know, when you put an application in, they are actually going to look at your LinkedIn profile. I would say you don't want it to be an exact replica or a mirror of it, but, you know, LinkedIn's got some kind of clever features on it that you can ask people for recommendations, for example. I would never just say, don't go out and just get them to endorse your skills, because you could be asking, you know, 10 mates to do that and just say, oh yeah, endorse my skills in communication. If you can go out and seek some recommendations, so if you've got some work experience, maybe ask a previous line manager or a colleague or a client or somebody you've worked with in the past just to write a little review about you, because actually that's like your testimonial. It's like, you know, somebody putting something saying 9 out of 10 people say this person is great. And that would be where I would say that LinkedIn becomes better than a CV, because you get that personal recommendation.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I think that is all the questions we have for now. But I will put Michelle's LinkedIn in the chat so that you can all obviously connect with her outside if you still want to ask some questions. I just want to let everyone know that the recording for this session will be in our community, and it'll also be posted on our YouTube channel. We'd really highly recommend going onto our community. We've got all our free events, job opportunities, mentorship opportunities as well. So I'd highly recommend going on there and just getting the chance to speak to everyone and really get to know people that are in a similar position as you. So that's all I've got to say on that. But I can't wait to see you guys on there. And thank you so much for joining. And thank you so much to Michelle. You've been incredible and your advice has stayed with me now. So thank you so much for joining us on that one.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, guys. And I hope to see you all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.